I just told Mr. Waller, how important he is today.
It's a rarity.
So as soon as we get, oh, there's Mr. Juray. All right. That's that. Are you okay, Mark, or do you want to take a minute or so?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Dial it up. I don't want people to be waiting on me. Sorry I'm a little bit late. I apologize.
Oh, we weren't waiting on you.
So I call the December 11, 2019 PPRTA Board of Directors meeting to order. We do have a quorum, and thank you all for coming. Item number 2 is approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any changes, modifications to the agenda? Seeing no interest in that, can I get a motion?
So moved.
A second? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There being none, we move to item 3, public comment period for items not on the agenda. Any members of the public want to talk about anything that is not on the agenda? And I do note, we'll wait a second because Miss Avila is walking in right now. Avila. So we'll pause for just a second. And Ms. Avila, we just started. We've approved the agenda and had no further Avila.
I apologize.
No, don't worry. Mr. Waller's already apologized for you.
Let the record reflect I apologize for me being late.
So seeing no public comment, that period is closed. Item number 4 is a resolution of appreciation for City of Manitou Springs Director Ken Juray. I will be reading the resolution of support, or resolution of approval. Resolution by the Pikes Peak Rural Transportation Authority Board of Directors acknowledging appreciation to the City of Manitou Springs Director Ken Juray, December 11, 2019. Whereas the City of Manitou Springs is a member government of the Pikes Peak Rural Transportation Authority, and whereas Ken Juray served as mayor of the City of Manitou Springs from January 2018 to the present, when he served as a Pikes Peak RTA Board Director from January 2018 to the present, and whereas City of Manitou Springs Director Ken Juray has served the citizens of the City of Manitou Springs and the Pikes Peak region with distinction, now therefore be it resolved, the Pikes Peak Rural Transportation Authority Board of Directors wishes to acknowledge their deepest gratitude to City of Manitou Springs Director Ken Juray for his commitment to regional transportation planning and projects, for his wise counsel, and for his dedication to the advancement of the transportation projects of the Pikes Peak Rural Transportation Authority, resolved, approved, and adopted by the Board of Directors of the Pikes Peak Rural Transportation Authority this 11th day of December 2019 at Colorado Springs, Colorado, and it is signed by me on behalf of the Board of Directors and by Mr. Sonnenberg as Board Secretary. I'll open this to discussion if anybody wants to object. Mr. Waller.
Well, yeah, I'm definitely objecting, but I will begrudgingly second the motion there. Ken, you've been outstanding for this board, and I'm sorry that your time in government was so short, and you're not going to be back for a little bit more punishment. I've really appreciated serving with you, my friend.
And I'm going to take that as the motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. Avila. Yes. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There being none, Mr. Juray, why don't you come forward? And I note the timing, Mr. Sonnenberg, of giving hard hats to citizen representatives after the service is almost done is not the appropriate time to give. But that said, let me
But
come
I'm
up.
going to spend a lot more time at home, so this may come at home. So, and everybody, when you come up and get a picture.
He can still use it to get through West
All of us are
Colorado,
going to go?
Everybody come on up, let's get a picture.
which is only substantially
You
complete.
can have that one. God, that's my name on it.
And doesn't he get a few words, too?
And then you get words after. Yeah.
Bingo, yes.
You still made it to West Colorado, so.
All right, thank you. And if you want to sit and say a few words, we'd like to hear from you. Thank you. One thing I want to do is I want to introduce my replacement. John Graham is the mayor-elect. John will be joining you in January. He'll be a great addition to this board. I've been a lifelong, almost lifelong resident here, so I'm sure you will welcome John as we do these. So thank you very much. Thank you for the certificate for this. I have very much enjoyed this being with this group, and I didn't tell the other group that PPACG was very kind as well. I started my career at PPACG 40 years ago.
Wow.
I was in Columbus, Ohio, and someone from PPACG from the Criminal Justice Department wrote to my boss in Columbus, Ohio, and said, could you help us with this mediation program we'd like to start? So I moved out to College Springs, got hired by PPACG back in 1979 in the Criminal Justice Department.
Wow.
Who would have thought, 40 years later, here I am having just finished my term on this board and the PPACG board. So it was a great journey, and I very much appreciate working with all of you. So thank you.
Item number 5, the approval of minutes from November 13, 2019. Does anybody have any changes, modifications to the minutes? Seeing none, may I have a motion?
Move to approve?
A
Second.
All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There being none, that motion carries. Item number 6, Citizen Advisory Committee Monthly Report. Mr. Godfrey.
Good afternoon, Jim Godfrey, Chair of the CAC. The first piece of good news is our meeting was only an hour and 40 minutes or so, so the race is on. City of Colorado, we reviewed submission by the city, submitted 4 contracts. Just like to highlight, we have a unanimous recommendation for all of them. But we'd just like to point out a couple of things. One of them is the contract for, drawing a senior moment, Van Buren Safe Rights to School project. So that some of you may remember that in a different form from a couple months back. The other one is that garnered some discussion was Platte Avenue Bridge over Sand Creek. One direction of that was an A-list project, and the other one was a B-list project. And they're combining what is now 2 spans of considerable length into one bridge unit. And Mike, I'm sure, will go over how they are dividing the funds up. Part of that is with a federal grant, and some of it was RTA money. So that came up, but in the end, we still recommend approval of that contract. The county came forward with 3 contracts. We had a discussion about those. Jennifer did a great job of describing what those were, and my understanding is in your packet, those are defined into 2 projects because 2 of our 3 were related. Again, we have a unanimous recommendation for those. The city gave a great overview of Rock Rimmon Boulevard roadway improvements, great update, and we thank Corey and his staff for keeping us informed of that major project, and living in that area. Absolutely appreciate the work that's being done on that road. So great job. The other information that we voted on and make a recommendation to you is on the PPRTA website. Jenny will give you an update of that. We recommend that we vote for approval for you to. We recommend that you vote approval for them to release and go active with that website as soon as it's completed. There's some minor adjustments being made. We think that anything over the current site would be much improved and brought to more current technology. So other than that, that's really all we had to go.
Any questions for Mr. Godfrey? Seeing none, may I
I
have...
actually have one.
Oh, yes, Mr. Gonzalez.
So the Van Buren, that was rejected by this board
5 to 3, is that accurate?
The line item transfer of funds from a project to that fund was refused or rejected several months ago, yes.
Thank you.
And just to clarify, that was the line item transfer from another source, but this is using sources that... there's no
Internal
transfer.
sources, correct.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Godfrey? Seeing none, may I have a motion to accept the Citizen Advisory Committee monthly report?
Move to approve.
A second? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Being none, thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Godfrey. Item number 7, financial reports. Miss Madge. I like how Suzanne does that, yes.
Okay, so for the month of October, we would just received $9,713,000 of sales and use tax. So we were $1,243,000 ahead of the budget for the month of October, and we're $9,030,000 ahead for the year to date. So if we add where we'll be for interest, being ahead of budget of $2.6 million, we will achieve the $11.6 million that we needed in order to have the 55% capital calculation cover the I-25 gap $10 million contribution to that project. So I think we're there, unless we have something that we have a negative month, and I don't anticipate that. So then on page 2, it shows that we exceeded the October actual last year by $855,000, so we're ahead of last year actual to date by $5,259,000. Are there any questions on the financial reports?
Are there any questions with that regard? I would ask you to go in and would recognize that I received a phone message from Mr. Williams saying that he and board member Holly Williams, as a good couple, are sharing everything this holiday season, including a bug that prevents them from being here. Mr. Williams, I understand, had raised some concerns on page 3. If you would at least address his concerns,
Sure.
And then maybe next month we can come back and dive into deeper detail.
So on page 3, more than halfway down, there's the maintenance section. And in that section, each of the member governments, the first column is what they've spent to date, and the second to last column is the annual budget. Then the difference in a percentage of the annual budget. And the town of Green Mountain Falls has spent 87% year-to-date, City of Manitou Springs 24%, City of Colorado Springs 54%, El Paso County 39% to date. Now, there's always a lag of receiving invoices, so, it's not surprising that it's a lot less than 100, but Councilman Williams' concern is that some of the member governments tend to carry over from year to year funding.
The maintenance funding.
The maintenance funding. This is the maintenance, yes. Capital, it makes total sense because they're accumulating it to get into the construction phase of the project. So that's not surprising. On the maintenance side, though, there's a comment like the smaller member governments tend to carry over quite a bit because they don't really accumulate. They have to accumulate enough to do a major project. If they want to have something paved, the amount, like let's say the town of Green Mountain Falls, $41,000 is their annual budget. They're not going to be able to do very much for that. And so they tend to carry it over from year to year. And that's just my only comment about that.
Okay, and I'm just putting that in there because I understand that Mr. Williams raised that concern with you, and in fairness to him, since he's not here, I wanted to at least put that out there. Thank you. Any other comments or questions for Beverly? Seeing none, we go to item 8, fiscal year 2020 budget public hearing and approval of the budget.
Okay,
So-
so last month, we had, we reviewed the budget, and both the CAC and the board, the CAC recommended approval to the board of the budget as presented. So today, we need to open the public hearing and hear any public comments on the proposed budget, and then the board will have a discussion and then vote on resolutions to adopt the budget and appropriate the funds.
Thank you. So we would open the budget hearing to public comment at this point.
Public hearing.
Public hearing, well, the hearing, this is a public hearing.
Well, I
So
guess
it's a
that's-
special sub-hearing on the budget that is now open to public comment. So if the public wants to come up and,
Just to clarify, we're in a public meeting.
A public
and we're now
meeting.
convening the
Public-
public hearing within the public meeting. Leave it to the lawyers, right?
ditto what she just said. Okay.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to address the PPRTA Board. On behalf of the Fountain Valley Senior Center, I'm Jolene Hausman, Executive Director, Gail Nels for Envita, and Jason DeBueno with Silver Key. We're passing around a document now. And related to the operating and expenditure draft budget under the Specialized Transportation Services, Fountain Valley Senior Center, Envita, and Silver Key Senior Services, the HSP providers request that the PPRTA Board consider the following alternate proposal. That first, all funds are transferred and will be allocated and utilized to serve the specialized transportation services needs of the riders. No funds will be redirected to Colorado Springs city-sponsored transit activities, as all funds will be utilized for specialty transportation services. If you look in the budget on page 13, item number 10, the current language is through the striked-out information, and the line we would like stricken from the record is in coordination with the PPACG and CDOT and the human service providers. Any balance of PPRTA funds after the transition will be redirected to other city-sponsored transit. We would like it replaced with language similar to the following. No funds will be redirected to other city-sponsored transit activities, as all funds will be utilized for specialty transportation services, including when those services are transitioned to the new coordinating agency. All funds that are transferred will be allocated and utilized to serve the specialized transportation services needs of the riders. On behalf of the HSPs, we appreciate the opportunity to partner with the PPRTA Board to maximize the specialized transit services for the seniors and disabled throughout the entire region. Together, as a collective group, we will be able to provide more rides to seniors and disabled persons into 2020 and beyond.
Are there any other, does Gail or Jason want to make any comment at this point, or?
So Gail Nels, CEO with Envita. I really welcome this transition to the RTA. We believe this is a more inclusive solution for our community, in that many of the grants that Envita has been receiving over the past 18 months have looked at a more regional perspective and a more inclusive perspective, and up into Teller County, Callahan, and Park County. So thank you for this, considering this move into PPRTA auspices and administration. Thank you.
Jason?
I would just echo the comments that have been made so far, and just appreciate any support to move forward with this recommendation if possible.
Before you sit down, Mr. Gonzalez has questions. Anybody else? So we'll start with Mr. Gonzalez and Mr. Duray.
Okay, so I can better understand. So there's a certain amount of money allocated for the entire year, next year, to these services, and you're concerned that because of the changeover of who's managing it, that if the monies aren't spent at that turnover, money could then be pulled to go anywhere else.
Yes, we want to ensure that the whole $538,453 earmarked for specialized transit provides $538,453 worth of rides in our community.
Okay, so my follow-up question, do we know why the language of in coordination with PPACG and CDOT and Human Services, any balance of the PPRT funds after the transitions will be directed to other city-sponsored transit activities. Why that was put in by the city, or who put that in? Does anybody know?
I may be able to help at the end, and I'll try to address it
All
in
right, thank you.
something that I do know that might apply. Mr. Duray.
Well, just a follow-up question to that question, not only who put it in, but is it binding? Is it not just a budget note? Typically, a budget is a budget. The notes aren't necessarily binding, they're explanatory. And so my question is it binding as well? That may be a legal question.
It may be a legal question that we can direct to Jennifer. But it looks like Ms. Avila, were you interested in, it looked like you were going to talk.
Oh, I was just.
Okay. All right. I don't know if this is the reason. I do know that last year, and I have tendered the city auditor's report last month to Mr. Sonnenberg. There were some concerns raised about this program through the city auditor's office and through internal auditing, which may be the reason why the money wasn't completely given to the agencies that had come forward at that point in time. And the report is a public report. I can get a copy of it to anybody that's interested. And I do know, I think, you have a copy, don't you, Rick? And Mr. Sonnenberg has a copy of it as well.
Can I respond to the auditor's report since it's in reference to our audits?
I don't want to get into the specific. I think you
Right.
don't respond to the auditor's
No.
report. What I'm not, because I don't know for a couple reasons.
Right.
One is I can read a report. That doesn't mean I understand what the numbers are behind it.
Right.
And secondly, it's not that we're getting into the specifics of what the auditor found or didn't find. I'm putting that out as a possible explanation for why this change was included
So
in.
I would just like to say that the auditor's report is not the reason for the change in who funds specialized transit in our region.
Do you know the reason why the comment is in there, the request to potentially transfer the money?
I'm not sure why the direct comment is in there when the money was going to initially be transferred from Mountain Metro housing the funds to finding a different funding house for it. All of the funds were initially strucken from the budget until I reached out to Travis to have the funds put back in the budget.
Any other? Oh, yes.
If I may. So what we're concerned about is making sure that all the funds are transferred into our program to support the community. In the past, under some different administration, there was some restriction on trip purposes that I think, frankly, disenfranchised members of the community we serve and that are part of our community here. People primarily with disabilities, developmental and intellectual disabilities, and those with older adults. There was money that was left on the table that was not spent delivering services. So we are asking that this language be changed so that we can have access to those funds to support our community.
Mr. Duray.
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, as I understand it, is the $538,453 that's in the budget, is that the amount of money that you are in favor of putting into that, whether it goes to PPACG or CDOT? The amount is okay. You're only questioning the comment that if it's not spent, it could be redirected by Colorado Springs.
Thank you.
That's the only comment, not
Thank
the
you.
number, the amount.
Thank you.
We could pass the budget, strike that comment, and we don't even know if the comment is binding or not.
And I do see Mr. Blewett is here. So,
But it's not a question, the amount isn't the question. The only thing you're questioning is whether the funds should be redirected if they're not fully spent.
Yeah, we just want to ensure the funding is available for the seniors and disabled to access transportation throughout the entire calendar year.
Mr. Waller.
But isn't that the case, though? It only says if the funds aren't spent that that happens.
Right, but the change in the funding, who's going to be housing the funding through the nonprofits is going to switch before the end of June. So what we don't want to see happen is if PPACG or CDOT house those funds in March, that the remainder of the funds, we want to ensure that the whole lump amount follows specialized transit, no matter who is housing those funds.
Well, that's not the way, I didn't read it to say that it doesn't do that, but
I don't either. Mr. Gonzalez.
Well, it says it will go, so after the language that's in there that says if it's not spent, regardless of the reason, it will be redirected. So I'm kind of like leaning towards why don't we just strike that? I don't know if it needs the additional language. The additional language would, I don't say it this way, it seems like it overly protects you, which would be great for you, but at the very least, the striking of it doesn't specifically target you by taking it. I mean, it mandates a takeaway because it says it will be redirected.
We would fully support just the strike.
And so that's where I'm kind of like in the middle here, thinking if we just strike that language, then something could go somewhere else, but that would require somebody's kind of vote or additional versus it just happening. And I think that protects both parties. It can still be moved to other areas of transit, but some entity would have to approve that, whether it's city or, I don't know if it's here or city, but I think it leaves more flexibility, striking the language but not including the new language.
I qualify this comment with the caveat that a little knowledge can possibly be misleading, and I don't intend to do that. But my understanding is that as a result of the audit of other service providers last year, in the middle of the year, there was a question as to where the money that had been directed to a particular provider, how that was going to be spent. Because that money could no longer go to that provider, as I understand it. And I think that this may be the reason that we have this here. I don't know for sure. I don't see Travis here. I'm not sure if Mr. Blewett, do you want to talk about this? If you don't, because I really don't want to get into the nuts and bolts of the audit itself. So do you not want to? If you want to talk about the budget, if you can shed anything here without getting into the specifics of the audit and who was audited, that's fine. I think that would be a good idea if you could come up and shed some light on this. Thank you.
So this is information we were prepared to present last month, but we didn't. I think the bottom line in terms of the proposal, let me just say a couple things. We would be happy, or we would support, just striking the language as it exists now and not adding any new language. That would be a good outcome. I think in terms of why we're proposing what we're proposing, the intent of those notes was just to be open, right? It was just providing information. So the budget note does say in coordination with PPACG or CDOT and the human service providers, any balance of PPRTA funds after the transition will be redirected to other city-sponsored transit activities. So ours was proposing basically a consolidation of the administration of funding that supports the human service providers into one organization. That would be PPACG. To fund the HSP operations, PPACG or CDOT would use what we have another funding source, which is Federal Transit Administration 5310 funds, which I'll talk about in a second. They are dedicated for enhanced mobility of seniors and individual disabilities. That's the purpose of that funding source. And that would be that's dedicated to the Colorado Springs urbanized area. And with the 5310 funds, we get an annual revenue between $450,000 and $500,000 a year, which under our proposal would be available to PPACG to fund this program. In addition, there's a $1.4 million balance of 5310 funds in previous years and current year funding. So there's about $450,000 to $500,000 a year plus a $1.4 million balance. So the intent is to transition the administration, consolidate the administration under PPACG with the same amount of money. That's the intent. So why are we proposing that? We think it's a better fit. It's the direction that the Denver area is headed currently, to consolidate those funds under Dr. Cog. Dr. Cog, like PPACG, administers the AAA funding for transportation for people with seniors, and to consolidate that in one location. So there's one set of invoices, not two sets of invoices every month, and so forth. And that allows us, Mountain Metro, to focus on traditional transit, our fixed route service, our complementary ADA paratransit service, as well as first and last mile services feeding into our system. The HSP trips that the funds represent is 1% of our funding. So we're talking about 1% of what MMT does. We think it's a better fit with PPACG. And with programming all administered under one entity, it provides that the potential to get to the complete picture of how well the community is being served. For example, if one provider's denied ride is given by another provider, right now we don't know that. And under one administration, that would enable that to happen. So why proposing using 5310 funds is consistent with the purpose of those funds. Again, it's for enhanced mobility for seniors and people with disabilities. It allows PPACG to be the direct recipient of those 5310 funds and manage its use. And HSBs have been receiving $800,000 a year for operations. PPRTA funding would be used for the first half of this coming year, which is why we're intending that. And that amount, that $538,000, is basically one half of the budget. And there's a $1.4 million balance in that 5310 funds going forward and revenues coming in. So that's the idea. And I think, striking language is fine. We're just providing that language for information. Andy Gunning is here and can speak to PPACG's position on that. I think if I heard last time Andy spoke about it, they're going through basically the due diligence process to understand what it means to administer those 5310 funds and if it's a good fit for PPACG as well. And we're expecting to have conversations soon with the human service providers and PPACG further about that.
Okay, Mr. Gunning, do you have anything that you want to add to this?
No, well summarized by Craig. It's moderately big shift to PPACG for us, but we already administer the AAA funds, which is about 55%, I think, of the total money that goes into rides provided by the service providers. So it makes sense that administering the FTA portion, the 5310 funds that Craig mentioned, a bunch more hurdles we have to jump through to get to that point, and see Dr. Cog's process and going through that with CDOT, it's taken about a year to make that happen. It could happen much more quickly with the PPRTA funds, so maybe there's a way we can break it off and have PPACG begin to administer the PPRTA funds that go into those rides, but then the 5310 might take a little bit longer, but as Craig mentioned, we're going through our due diligence right now to see how we can make this all happen. Probably going to take it to the PPACG board in the next month or so to get their consent and understanding as to what this means to us as an organization. I do need somebody that's dedicated that can help manage this, and I think we can pay for that through the 5310 funds. So a lot of moving parts. We think it makes sense putting it all under one umbrella, as Craig mentioned, and would ultimately provide better service to seniors.
Do you agree with Mr. Blewett that striking the language and not adding the new requested language would still be sufficient to accomplish what PPACG is seeking to accomplish here?
Yes, I think that helps clarify if we strike that portion, yes.
And I just wanted to add one comment. It's been a long road, and we've all worked really well together collaboratively, the HSPs, Mountain Metro, PPACG. And for those of you that have been meetings in the past, me and Craig are up here asking for the same thing, like we've come so far. So I just really want to acknowledge as well, like how much the City of Colorado Springs has worked with the HSPs to find a great solution to benefit our community as a whole. So thank you, Craig.
Any other comments or questions? Ms. Avila.
Thank you, Chair Geisinger. I think this makes sense, and it's a great fit. That it's another lane that I actually jump into once in a while, and it makes sense for Mountain Metro to focus on the fixed routes and the paratransit, our metro mobility, and for it to, the special services to be under one umbrella, and it, with the AAA, and I think it's a really good fit for PPACG, and so I would really like to support this endeavor and move forward.
Any other comments, concerns? Ms. Nels?
Because, Chair, you brought up something about the audits, I would like to put on record that I believe you might have been referring to my agency. I would like to say I contest any of those findings. I've met with the city auditors and their report, and I know this is not the meeting to do this, but I'd be happy to work with you and the city council to review that audit and my concerns about the findings. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Can I get a motion, or does anybody want to make a motion for modification? Mr. Gonzalez?
So this will be a motion to approve the budget with the striking of the language as described, with no additional new language.
Yes, and the language is on page 13 of the budget, so we'll amend that for the final budget copies that go to the board.
And I'm not looking at the budget right now, but is this accurate? So that page 13, number 10, just to clarify, would read in its entirety as far as this paragraph is concerned, budget shown is for the entire year $538,453. However, it is proposed to transition HSP program administration from Mountain Metro Transit City of Colorado Springs to PPACG or CDOT by June 30, 2020, period. And that would be the end of that section. Is that correct, Mr. Gonzalez?
Correct.
Okay. Do I have a Ms.
But we're not going to fill in, no funds will be redirected. We're just
Correct.
going to end it right there. Okay,
After 2020.
okay.
Do I have a second for that motion? Any discussion? All in favor, and this is a motion to approve the budget as amended, as we just indicated. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There being none? Well, that
And then
was
we'll-
premature, wasn't it? I'm sorry, because I have to see if there's any other public comment on the budget before I take that motion. So is there, before we do that, is there any other public comment on the budget? Thank you so much, I'm sorry. Seeing none, can we go ahead and do what we just did?
Close the public hearing.
Close the public hearing, so we're going to close the public hearing, and we'll redo this again, and I
And
apologize,
so,
Mr. Gonzalez.
while we're redoing this, could we do both parts at once and approve the 2020 budget with the revision to page 13, item 10, and appropriate the sums of money thereunder, all in one fell
Yeah.
swoop?
That's what I'm asking. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? It still passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Neener.
And thank you for, okay. Item number 9A, City of Colorado Springs Capital Maintenance and Public Transportation Contracts. Mr. Chavez.
Good afternoon, Board. Mike Chavez, the City Engineering. I've got 4 contracts for your review today. First contract is a construction contract for Blue Ridge Construction for the construction of a roundabout at Parkside and Prentice Parkway. That is a very high accident location. It's got a fair amount of accidents, and and based on the volume, it doesn't have volume like an academy, but for the volume, it ranks the number 3 high accident location in the city. And there's some grant funding. There was some grant funding that we applied for a while back, and CSU is kicking in about $300,000 for some utility relocations. So we're asking approval for this contract and the use of $1.181 million of RTA funds.
Any questions on the first contract? Seeing none, go ahead.
Okay, next item is a task order-based contract for Adirondack Constructors for the installation of guardrail. That contract would be used by the city with capital and maintenance funds. it's a $0 because at this point, because it's just as we have the funds and have needs, we'll just issue task orders against that contract.
Any questions on this contract? And why don't you skip to the fourth contract?
Okay. The fourth item is a construction management contract for Wilson and Company. It's for construction management and materials testing on the Platte Avenue Bridge. That's for $2.1 million. We are looking at bidding that project probably in February, March, and that, as was mentioned earlier by Jim, the way the bridge got listed was westbound was an A-list and eastbound was a B-list project, but we went after a grant funding, so that became available. So basically, we're funding that total project with half grant, half RTA funds. A couple of things that came up last week. There's a question, the memo says that we're shorting the bridge. The reason we're doing that is because when CDOT built that bridge way back, I think it's 15 years old, they just spanned Sand Creek as it is. It's a very wide, meandering stream. What we've done now is we're actually matching what the creek section is upstream and downstream. So as development has happened, we've kind of narrowed the stream to an appropriate level, so we're matching what's there now. And then there was a question about the channel. We're going to rebuild the channel and armor it with RTA because we always, armor the streams to protect the bridges that we built. Very similar to what we did on Academy and Cottonwood Creek.
Are there any questions on that particular contract? I have had a request to pull item 3 and deal with separately. So before we get to that, can I get a motion on 9A items 1, 2, and 4? Or not?
I move to approve items 1, 2, and 4.
All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There being none, agenda item 9A, 1, 2, and 4 is approved. Mr. Chavez, can you address item 3?
Okay. So we are looking for approval for a construction contract for Avery Asphalt to construct pedestrian and bike lanes along Van Buren from T-Gap to Circle Drive, basically. This is a project that's been on the books for a while. We applied for a grant back in 2013. We actually asked and got approval from the RTA board to use $61,000 of maintenance for the grant match. I have a copy of the minutes from that meeting.
And that was in 2013, you said?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
As we went through the design, there was more work to be done, mainly with the pedestrian access. There was some missing sidewalks. There were alley crossings that had curb drop-offs that have to be brought up to ADA compliance, and some corners have to be redone so that we have a continuous pedestrian access through that area. When we saw that the cost was more than what we had, we did talk to CDOT about maybe just doing one side of the road on the school side, but they said since the grant was to do pedestrian access on both sides of the road and also install bike lanes, we have to do the whole project. So at that point, we thought we would need maybe a couple $100,000 of RTA missing sidewalk funds. So we've got bids in, and what we're looking at doing is awarding about, $516,000 contract to Avery. The way we have funding is we've got $244,000 of grant money. We've got $10,000 of stormwater money for some storm work. We've got $40,000 of city bike tax to take care of the road dining portion. That basically will cover the fog seal and the striping to a three-lane section. And then we're looking at needing about be 212 of RTA for the concrete work.
And this is money that is already within the project, or?
Yes, so basically, we, in the missing sidewalk program, we usually hold a couple $100,000 so that if we have a project that needs some assistance, we can fund that. We've used that, or we're going to be using the missing sidewalk funds to help some pedestrian access on Fillmore for the Route 6 work that will be starting soon. And so what happened in, what was that, June, I just was trying to get some money into the missing sidewalk program because we had a lot of money sitting in the Academy project, which we knew we weren't going to use, so I was just trying to backfill that program that was not approved. So basically, we had the money in there. The ramification by not getting that money is just that we built a little bit less sidewalk with the base program, but not a big deal. I mean, we build as much as we can every year with the money we have.
And so this is money that is already in the account that has not been
Yes.
expended? Okay. Mr. Gonzalez, you asked to have this
Yeah, sure. And I bring this up because this was controversial back in June. And why it is because this is for road dieting of Van Buren, which has been controversial in the region and in Colorado Springs. At that time, several members indicated that this was very important for kids' safety. Yet, Colorado Springs just approved the annual budget. They could have included this in that annual budget, but decided not to do so. So I don't know why they just didn't do it then. I understand in June, that was mid-year. Now at the end of the year, you could have included it in the next year's budget and not had to bring that controversy to PPRTA. And why that's important is because, as we've been bringing up how many months in a row, credibility for PPRTA and its board as we move forward to potentially requesting a PPRTA 3 project request. Van Buren is not a named project, but you're bringing a controversial vote here for road dieting. Did taxpayers have that in their mind, road dieting, when they passed PPRTA? Because we're going to have to go back to them in the future on this. And so that is a concern. So it's not a PPRTA named project. Road dieting may or may not, but I think it's controversial. It's probably what was not on the minds of taxpayers when we passed the previous one, and we may be going back. We need to protect that credibility. And then, honestly, I think this is, voting for this is your official endorsement of PPRTA and taxpayer funding of road dieting, which I will not be supporting. Thank you.
I guess what I'd like to say is I think the taxpayers were aware of this because I forget the policy where we will bring projects that we're considering road dieting to the board for information, and that policy was enacted at the beginning of RTA 1. So I think voters know that the city has road dieted projects. West Colorado was reduced from 4 lanes to 3 lanes. That was a named project. I think people are well aware that the RTA and some city funds are used in lane reductions. Now, what the city has become more cognizant of is making sure we have a good public process to let people know that we're considering that. We've had success with the road dieting. The ones that have been done are working well. T-Gap, which is where Van Buren ties into, was reduced to 3 lanes several years ago, and it carries about 13,000 cars a day, and it operates fine. I use that as a shortcut to get from downtown to the east side. Like I said, it's about 13,000 cars a day. It's working fine. Van Buren is basically a dead-end street in this section, and it carries about 3,000 cars. So from an operational standpoint, we don't see any problem with that.
Any other comments from Ms. Avila?
I think this is clearly an PPRTA project that needs to be approved. I mean, number one is safety. is safety. I think it's an ideological thing that's going on with the road dieting. One of the biggest complaints that I get through emails is speeding. And it's important to do this calming down, especially where we have kids coming from every direction to the school. So it's imperative on a safety issue to make sure that happens. And as a pedestrian who walks 2 to 4 miles a day, I get areas where there aren't the ADA ramps and where cars are just going ridiculously fast, like 20 miles over the speed limit. And I think this is truly a PPRTA project. And I regret that we did not support this sooner, to have this groundbreaking sooner for the safety of our children in Colorado Springs. We do a majority of the funding for PPRTA, and I think we should be given the leeway to figure out what is best, what we see is best for our city. So I thank you, Mr. Chavez, for presenting this and finding, even though we did not approve this, that you figured out a way to get a grant and to make this happen for the safety of our kids.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Thank you. And again, I appreciate the passion. This was the same comments that were given last time. I think Richard was here instead of you, Yolanda. And I would go back to what I said earlier. You could have approved this in your city council budget, and for some reason, it was pushed back to PPRTA.
Well, we fund a lot of PPRTA, a large percentage, and that's why PPRTA exists for us in the city. So it's like, why should we even fund PPRTA at the amount that we do when we're not even allowed to use or decide what we think is a priority in our city?
Mr. Waller?
Just a little teeny bit of disagreement there. None of us fund the PPRTA. The citizens of Colorado Springs, El Paso County, and all of the other jurisdictions are the ones who fund it. And so they fund it based on a very specific list, which is, I think, what Commissioner Gonzalez is saying. And he's saying road dieting was not on that list, wasn't contemplated in the transit piece of it. Maybe somebody else can make an argument. I don't know. But I don't think that, I don't think any of us, and I don't think it's right for us to say that we fund it or don't fund it. It's the taxpayers who fund it.
I do have some comments to make, but before I do, anybody else have any comments? I would say first that it is clear that the taxpayers in approving the measure approved also the use of program funds for these types of activities. And I think we have to be very cautious, and I would caution Mr. Gonzalez about the credibility of the board, about making sure that the board doesn't become so overstepping of its appropriate authority that the board then becomes the determiner of how each individual jurisdiction will use its funds. That's the discussion we had last month with regard to the maintenance funds of Manitou Springs. It's a very important question to ask whether the board, and frankly, it was what Mr. Williams was bringing up today about maintenance funds for the smaller jurisdictions, that the board should pay, and there's a difference between maintenance and capital. The second precedent that I'm concerned with is these are funds that are already dedicated, that were already approved for this type of improvement. That the city, in its discretion, put this on a higher priority so that these funds that have already been approved for this purpose can be used for this particular project is how a public works department of any member government should work. So they're not asking for an approval of additional money. They're not asking for a transfer of money. They're taking money that's already in the budget for sidewalk improvement last year that was approved by this board, and they're using it for that purpose. The only reason that they're bringing it here is because the consequence of doing that is there's going to be road dining along with it, and there's a requirement that be notified. By denying this, the board is taking a major step in the direction of saying, now we are going to revisit budgets that have been approved for various projects, and we are going to be able to exercise our authority after the fact, after we've already approved these program funds, that you can't use the program funds for this particular part of the program because we disagree with that. And that's a major, major precedent that I'm not willing to go to. So any other comments or questions? Pardon me? I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve.
A second? I will second. And we can do.
We did last time.
We can do a roll vote.
We did last time.
And Mr. Waller, it looked like you were going to say something.
I was just going to suggest we do a roll call
Yeah.
vote.
All right. Mr. Carpenter. Aye. Chair says aye.
Nay.
Ms. Avila?
Aye.
Mr. Waller?
No.
Mr. Giray? Aye. Aye, so that passes on a 4-2 vote. And thank you,
All right,
Mr.
thank you.
Chavez. Item 9B, El Paso County Capital Maintenance and Public Transportation Contracts.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Board, Jennifer Irvin, El Paso County Engineer. We have 2 items for your consideration today. The first item has 4 components. As we have been discussing in previous meetings, we have several projects out in the Falcon area that we have they're in process of advertising for construction and under award, but we also have the construction management contract for those 4 separate projects. And because of the proximity of those contracts, although we advertise some of those separately for construction, we have one contract for construction management to oversee all those projects. Due to the proximity, we thought it would be, 1, easier to manage, and 2, better efficient use of the funds. So that construction management contract, we're recommending Alfred Benish in the amount of $727,000. To Meridian Road Extension, which is a capital project from the first PPRTA, and then the New Meridian Extension, New Meridian US 24 intersection, and the Meridian McLaughlin Roundabout, which are both projects from the second PPRTA, and then New Meridian Reconstruction, which is, we're going to be taking an opportunity to reconstruct that road as well, and that's maintenance. And there is a great project map that my staff put together to show each of those projects in your packet. And then the second item is Eastonville Road. We are getting that project underway. Our staff has already completed the design survey internally, but we are moving forward with a contract, hopefully, with Wilson and Company to do a study over the entire section of the roadway. Recommend that Wilson and Company for about $97,000.
Any questions on either of these projects? I would entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
A second? I did not second. All right, second. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any negatives, opposed? There being none, that has approved. Thank you, Jen. And it looks like you...
Can I take a moment? I just wanted to extend my appreciation to Mayor Ken Giray. As we have worked on the Colorado Avenue project, you, your city council, and your staff have been excellent to work with. Just want to let you know how much we appreciate your service and our coordination and our relationship with Manitou. Thank you.
That's out of order because it's not on the agenda. Yeah, thank you.
You allowed me to speak.
Yes, I did. It is. Item 10A, City of Colorado Springs Transit Services Monthly Update. Mr. Blewett. You don't have to run that fast, Craig.
I respect your time.
Good afternoon, Craig Blewett, Transit Services Manager with the City of Colorado Springs. Our report is in your packet. I'd just like to briefly touch on that and just mention a couple other things. In the report, looking at our local fixed route bus service, we had a slight decrease compared to last year of 0.62% for the month of October. If you recall, we had a snow event in October, and we were shut down for a day, so that reflects really our lack of operations on that day. On the ADA side, we're showing a big decrease of some 24%, and I just want to let you know we're digging into that to find out what's going on. Is that a data issue, or is that a reduction in rides? So we'll dig into that, and we'll let you know what we find. On the van pool side, we also had a decrease, but we do have month-to-month variation. We'll lose an entire van for a period of time based on transfers of personnel, people getting jobs, leaving jobs, and so forth. But the good news is that we're able to right-size the number of vans that actually make the trips up to Denver and where they're going. So we can reduce the number of vans, and if you look at the information there, we actually improved our boardings per revenue service hour despite the reduction in passengers. On the current planning projects, we've talked about this before, but there's 2045 plans being done as part of the PPACG long-range transportation plans. So we have a transit plan and as well as a specialized transit coordination plan. Draft plans went out for public review and comment the week of November 11th, and those plans will be up for approval and adoption by the PPACG board during the month of January. And as I've indicated before, we're also working on a North Nevada Avenue transit connectivity study, and that's in process right now. I think,
Before we begin, any questions on that portion of the report? Miss?
I don't have a question, I have a comment.
He's gonna get into the award he got yesterday.
Yeah, I know. I wasn't.
Okay.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert. It's
I was
busy.
just going to take responsibility for the ADA going down because I'm taking more fixed route than bus. So it's all my fault, Craig.
Which is a great segue into
yes.
the extremely good news.
Yeah, great news. So we've been recognized by the Colorado Association of Transit Agencies with 2 awards Mountain Metropolitan Transit has. And those were recognized at City Council on yesterday, I guess, where the director of CASTA came down to recognize us. And please know that it's our all of Mountain Metropolitan Transit. It's our staff back at the office. It's also our contractor staff. So TransDev does our operations for ADA Paratransit, and RATP Dev does our operations for fixed route. And it's really it's a team effort that results in these awards. But the first award, the bus drivers as well. Yeah, so they're part of the contractors, and they're outstanding. So the first award was CASTA's 2019 Large Community Transit Agency of the Year. So Transit Agency of the Year for the larger communities, which is awesome. And that was for our work improving access to our bus stops. So we, over the past year, constructed 1.3 miles of sidewalk around bus stops. 67 ADA-compliant ped ramps, those are the ramps that go onto the sidewalks, and 71 bus bench or bus shelter pads with ADA-compliant loading areas. $1.7 million was spent last year with those bus stop improvements. And we've seen an increase in fixed route ridership, and we've seen a decrease in ADA ridership. And, ADA is there for people who, because of their disability, cannot access the fixed route system. And by improving access and sidewalks and bench pads and or benches and so forth, it enables more people to ride the bus. And that's what it's all about. The more people who ride the bus, the better off we all are. And we're always going to have our complimentary ADA service for those who can't. But it's a great trend. And then secondly, we also got an award for 2019 Outstanding Coordination Initiative, and that was for our collaborative work with the hospitals up north to add a new bus route that provides access up there, and our corporate sponsorship. And through that corporate sponsorship, they're wrapping the buses with Care Connection, And the bus shelters and stops along that will also be branded, and they'll be part of all of our media that we put out. And that brings us in $68,000 a year that supports our services. So that was a huge deal. So we're very, very proud of that.
And just to elaborate, the large transit, large being relative, how big a population is large?
So communities of 15,000 people or more. So the funny thing about that, you say it's all relative. In Colorado, we're considered a large transit agency. In the nation, we're considered a small transit agency. Which is a segue into my next point, if I may just indulge you for one more minute. So, in our annual budget presentations, we like to take that opportunity to present how well our transit is serving our community here. And, the budget presentations were not made last month, so I'd like to, if I could, just distill a couple quick points, a 2-minute version of that. And, as a result of the budget cuts that happened during the Great Recession, 2009, 2010, our fixed route bus service was cut in half. The revenue service hours, that's how you measure all the bus services out on the road during a year. Our revenue service hours were cut in half as a result of those 2 years, the budget cuts. This year, in 2019, we're finally back to where we were in 2008 in terms of revenue service hours. And our 2020 budget enables us to continue that level. But the community population has grown by 20% since 2008. So while we're back up to the total revenue service hours we were then, we're losing ground. We've lost ground. We did a peer transit agency review this year as part of our strategic business plan. And one of the metrics was we compared our revenue service hours per capita. So all that service divided by how many people you're serving, right, or in your community. And compared to the 9 peer transit agencies, we have the lowest revenue service hours per capita. So, and what we also found looking at our peers is that we were better than average in terms of the cost per ride. So my message is, while we appreciate the support we've gotten to restore our service to the 2008 level, we're providing a minimal level of service, transit service to our community. And we're proud that we're efficient and are good stewards with the funding that we get. And I think the awards recognize that. I think that our cost per ride also reflects that. And so, we're doing the best we can with the resources we got, but we're still providing a minimal level of service.
And I would just, you talk about stewardship, that one statistic that just stands out above the rest is, a 5.8% increase in ridership. Mm-hmm. How does that compare to the national trends?
And national trends is going down. Ridership is going down, and we're bucking the trend. Yes.
Well done.
Yes.
Well done. Well deserved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Avila.
Thank you, Chair. This is so exciting, and this what shows the investment, just getting back to where we were, right, in 2008, what it's done. And I would hope to see more investment into transit. I experienced this on a personal level. When I used to go to the bus stop, like on University and Pikes Peak, there was not a chair there. So I couldn't find my bus stop. I was like, when I see a pole, so when I would go to places, I was struggling if there wasn't a chair there or a shelter. And now, there's almost a shelter everywhere. And so I'm able to figure out, I can see enough to see or run into the chair, or the bench. And so that and accessibility has made such a big difference on how we're adding more and more. And I think the city has been committed to making sure this has happened. And transit is the big reason I'm on PPRTA, because it's individuals that use transit, and especially individuals, seniors, and people with disabilities, we rely on it. And I don't know if you know, but people that are blind and have disabilities have higher suicide rates because of isolation. And it's easy to get isolated when routes were once an hour are really far from your home. So I think this is great, and this is the direction we need to move in, and also encourage like choice riders, people that choose to take transit. And so I think this is exciting, and I'm really appreciative of transit leadership and everybody on the team. So thanks for bringing this forward, and we're going to keep moving forward.
Any other comments? Thank you, sir.
Great, thank you.
Item 10B, City of Colorado Springs Rock Rimmon Reconstruction Update. Mr. Farkas, you don't look like David Scalarfi.
No, he had a dentist appointment.
He preferred a dentist appointment to a PPRTA board meeting?
No comment. And I actually have a meeting at the cab at 3 o'clock that I have to be in, so I'm going to kind of roll through this rather quickly. But when we started the Rock Rimmon, South Rock Rimmon Reconstruct, we endeavored to come as often as we could with updates, just to keep the board updated on progress and where we're at. So, wrong button. There we go. Get that back. So this is again the current work zone. We are basically South Rock Rimmon from Vindicator all the way to Pro Rodeo for the location on this. These are some photos of some of the removals. Here's the mill taking up some of that roadway. Being a partial reconstruct, we didn't do a lot of utility work. We did have utilities go in before us and upgrade some of their utilities, valves, things of that nature. But we call this a partial reconstruct in that we did upwards of over 21 inches of over excavation in some areas due to the subgrade, and that's exactly what you're seeing here is the mill taking up that surface. Bringing in good subgrade Class 6 road base, building up that roadway section, utilizing TX7 grid for stabilization under that roadway, and here you see the grader putting in all that material, rolling in that material. And then again, you can kind of see the grid there. It's kind of difficult with this photograph, but when that grid goes in over top of that subgrade, and then we bring the more Class 6 in over top of that again for subgrade stabilization. And then what you're seeing here is the roadway being lined with the string line for our curb machine to come in. We had some long poles on this roadway. We were able to utilize a curbing machine rather than hand forming all of the concrete, which actually saves us quite a bit of time and money when we're able to utilize that machine. And then that curb going in. Again, more of that curb going in. We do, at inlet structures and things of that nature, we'll be able to pull that curb machine for 1,000 feet or so, however long that pull might be. And then when we get close to any kind of inlet structures or anything like that, we do have handset crews come in and do all of the tie-in work for the curb and gutter. And then this is a cross pan that's going in. I'm not sure which crossing that is on the south side of the road, so it's probably at one of the apartment complexes or something. And then this is our paving machine, Schmidt's paving machine that was putting down it looks like the bottom lift of asphalt. So schedule, again, you have all of this in your packet. Start date, we started in April is when we gave the notice to proceed. Planned completion date was October 31st. However, Mother Nature had a few things to say about that with some snowstorms that had come in. October was not a great month for us, and really that's why we try to target October 31st with any of our paving programs, is to try to beat Mother Nature. But we've been successful in the last couple years, just not this year. So a progress report, we're looking at about 75% completed, 25% remaining, and upcoming work. So I'll just kind of speak to this. We've got everything between the curbs mostly complete. I won't even say substantially. We have bottom and middle lift completed on that. We have top lift of asphalt to go. The top lift was specified at 6428 rather than a 6422. It's a highly polymerized blend of asphalt, and we had an option to go ahead and try to find a few days of good paving weather and put a 6422. The asphalt manufacturers in town actually stopped producing 6428 towards the end of summer, so it just wasn't available by the time we got to the top lift. So we either had a choice to put 6422 down here this year, or defer the top lift of asphalt to the springtime when they start producing that particular mix of asphalt again. We decided to go ahead and defer that to the springtime, which actually works out pretty well because we do have a phase 2 to this, which will be to the east of Pro Rodeo. We've been doing some coordination with CDOT and traffic engineering on that, and it looks like we may be able to get that work coordinated and started and complete the top lift of asphalt in its entirety for the entire corridor at the same time, which would be a great benefit to us. So in the meantime, there will be some work going on through the winter months behind the curb, so the sidewalks and some of those small stem walls that were holding back some of the hillside will be worked on through the winter months, and then we will also have some temporary striping that has been put down. It needs to be refreshed, and it will need to be refreshed as we get snowstorms throughout the winter on that. And that's all going to be on the contractor's dime. That is not going to be put towards the budgeted numbers because they did not actually complete the work on time. So again, we're working with that contractor to be able to complete everything in the spring. Do we have any questions?
Any questions or comments for Mr. Farkas?
I will say that so far, with our projections, we are showing an underrun on Phase 1 and are looking to be able to fund Phase 2 with the underrun dollars. So it looks like we're going to be able to complete the entire corridor with what we originally had on the bid.
Good started with that.
Yeah.
There being nothing else, go ahead and go. You'll make your CAB meeting.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Item 10C, City of Colorado Springs Monthly Change Order and Property Acquisition Report. Anything? That's been presented in the packet. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Chavez? Okay. Item 10D, El Paso County Monthly Change Order and Property Acquisition Report.
Mine, because
She's right there. Any questions? Any questions for Ms. Irvin? Seeing none, she can continue to sit next to. Okay. 11A, appointment, reappointment of board members.
Rick Sonnenberg. This is simply a reminder to the board members to seek reappointment from your respective governing bodies. Your appointments are 1 year, the calendar year basis, pursuant to the board bylaws. So if you would like to be reappointed, please pursue that with your respective governing body. The other item is the board bylaws call for the three officers, board chair, vice chair, and board secretary, to be elected annually by the board of directors at the first meeting in January. So please be thinking about that as well. And each year, as you know, it flips from the chair is city or county and flips back and forth. So in 2020, the chair will be a county commissioner who's a RTA board member, and the vice chair will be a city member, a city director. So please be thinking about that for your January meeting, and that's it for that item, unless there are questions.
Any questions on that? There being none, 11B, quarterly reports from member governments.
These are the quarterly reports, information that comes in from each member government pursuant to the comprehensive IGAs. It comes in about 2 months after the end of the quarter, so it's on your agenda, and I'll attempt to take any questions you might have, but they're more appropriately could be addressed to the respective authors of the reports.
The reports were in the packet. Anybody have any questions about the reports? There being none, we'll go to item 11C, the PPRTA website.
PPRTA staff and the PPACG policy and communications staff have been working for several months to prepare a new and improved PPRTA website. Is currently a draft website under a special address that's noted in the memo. Hopefully you've had a chance to review the draft website that our policy and communications crack website and IT gal, Jenny Phillips. She used to be Jenny Lines, but she got married. So hopefully you've looked at that draft website. The CAC did and recommended to go live as soon as possible, subject to some maps being added and a couple other minor items that are noted in my memo. So if you're comfortable with proceeding, we're requesting an approval to proceed to go live, hopefully later this month with the addition of the maps.
So first, does anybody have any questions or comments to Mr. Sonnenberg about the website? Seeing none, I would take a motion to, I think it would be a motion to approve, is that correct?
Please.
A motion to approve going forward as soon as possible, once it's workable, after the maps are added.
Yes.
Okay.
No later than January 2.
Okay.
Move to approve.
A second? All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? You have your direction.
Thank you.
Item 12, any PPRTA member announcements?
I have an announcement.
Miss Avila. I spent a month trying to get that right.
I'm not even going to talk about the dais, but I just want to let you know that 3 years ago, I met the male of my life. And today is our anniversary. Puma and I have been together for 3 years, December 11th.
He's very excited
So
about this.
I wanted to
Still
share
the
that.
best-looking member of
He's the best, and he's the best guy I've ever had in my whole life, including my son.
All right, well, congratulations, Puma, and try not to be so excited. With that said, we are adjourned.
It's normal. He's a little more he's peppier today than normal.
He's like mad because he's not getting